What's up, passionate Pokemon players? I'm Ryan, and we're here for another episode of the Hawks Pokemon Nest. Excited this time. I have a lot bit less of a rogue deck this time, but I think it's still worth talking about, which is my Roaring Moon, which I like to call Turbo Moon. So I will go through the deck list, each card in the deck, why I've got it there, what it does. Then we will go through the strengths, strategies, and weaknesses of the deck, and then we'll finish with a couple of other cards you may consider swapping in or out. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Now let's go through the Pokemon of the deck first, and I'll preface it just again by saying this is really on the border of being a rogue deck, as Ancient Box and Roaring Moon, these are decks that do really well. I mean, they're not meta for sure, but they're competitive decks. But the list that I have is really different. It is pretty different. I mean, it has a lot of the cards here and there, but I think overall it's a very different list from what people are running. Another preface of this is that a lot of the cards in here are rotating out, so it is one that you kind of want to try out now, have some fun with it. I'm actually kind of gonna have this video cut in line of a lot of other videos I have lined up, but anyway, let's get through what the cards are now that is out of the way. Now, Roaring Moon EX is the first one in the deck. This deck overall really does go around him. This is your main attacker. We've got 3 of them. We do have the regular baby more Roaring Moons in there, but that's okay. This guy's really the main attacker in here, right? And also to preface too, somebody gave me the recommendation of go ahead and exporting the deck list, so you'll see that in there too. Okay, so let's kind of start from the top a little bit. Went a little bit too far. Okay, so we've got Radiant Greninja, as I mentioned, another card that's going to rotate out. This is your draw engine, and not only is it a draw engine, but you're also wanting to get your dark energies into the discard, so of course the Radiant Greninja does that for you. Right, then we've got the regular Roaring Moon. It says 2 right here because I've got 1 alt art in there or something like that. But we've got 3 of them, right? So we've got 3 of each. 3 regular Roaring Moons, little moons, and we've got 3 big moons, right? And then we have 1 Squawkabilly EX, just to kind of hope that we pull him, discard our hand, and go from there. So that's what makes this deck really quick. Of course, most people, in terms of the Pokemon, there's not a lot that's different in here, but let's get into some of the trainers and then really talk about the strategies, and then you're going to see where my list is slightly different from other people's. Alright, and now into the trainers. Awakening Drum is the spec I use. It's to me, it's just fits so well. What we're doing here, just in general in this strategy, is it's called Turbo Moon for a reason. We are going fast. We are trying to burn through this deck and just be hit every turn, knocking out opponents' battle cards as quickly as possible and getting our deck as low as possible as quickly as possible. And we shouldn't have to worry about running out of cards because we'll be loaded up and the battle's going to be over by then. Once we get down to maybe 10 or so in deck, we might have to worry, but shouldn't be an issue, okay? Dark Patch, 4 Dark Patches in there. I mean, that's pretty average what we're going to play in this deck. Sad that these are rotating out soon, but it is what it is. And then 4 Earthen Vessels, right? 4 Earthen Vessels in there so that we could pull the energies. A lot of times you're going to Earthen Vessel away your Dark Energy to grab 2 more and then go from there, right? Nest Ball. 4 Nest Balls. We definitely want to be able to get our Squawks, our Radiant Greninjas, and then going from there, pulling whatever else we need. Super Rod, I've got 2 Super Rods in there. This was the first deck I ever used Super Rod because it is necessary, because sometimes we do mill a couple of our Roaring Moons. Sometimes we actually do want some energies, especially when we're kind of getting towards the end of the game. This is usually where I'll use my Super Rod. Your opponent's looking at it and like, they're going to run out of cards. And then bam, you bust out a Super Rod and shuffle in maybe one of your Pokemon and 2 energies, or sometimes you're just going to do 3 energies so that you hope when you get Iono'd or something that you draw that energy and get it. So another part of this deck too is thinning it. We need to do what we can do, discard, so that when they're disrupting our hand, that we're going to draw into what we need, and that saved me in a couple matches. Okay, Switch Cart, 4 Switch Carts, another card that's rotating out. Trekking Shoes, another just perfect card for this deck that makes it even faster. Got 4 of them, and it is so crazy when turn 1s you're using Trekking Shoes, Awakening Drums, Squawkabillys, Radiant Greninja, PokéStops. I mean, sometimes you can get down to less than 20 cards in your deck on turn 1 just because of all of these draw power cards that aren't even necessarily supporter cards, right? And then PokéStop, of course, another Sada rotation card, but we've got 4 of those. 3 bosses orders. I'm only playing 3. Only had enough room there. This one's a debatable card with people thinking that maybe it should be a counter catcher. I think it's boss because you want a boss for game. A lot of times you are going to be ahead and you don't want to let your opponent get back in the match, or at least hide, right? Explorer's Guidance is a great card to help us mill what we need to mill, and of course it's an ancient card too as well, right? Professor Sada's Vitality, that's the one that hurts the most when we PokéStop it. That's what helps us load up our bench, or not just bench, but load up our moons so that they're easily able to attack and go from there. I mean, if you're going turn 2 and you can Dark Patch Sada's Vitality and attach per turn, then we've got a Roaring Moon that can attack. You can switch card into it, and a lot of times because we're running 4 of these cards and we're going through so much of the deck with the Squawk, with the PokéStop, with the Greninja, and all of that, it's not extremely challenging to find our Sada's Vitality and boom, get our first, even a 2 prize knockout turn too, which is our first turn. Ancient Booster Capsule, you really want those, and you want to use them strategically based on what your opponent's doing. You know, if they've got if they're using Dragapults, a lot of times I'm attaching to my big dog ones because it doesn't help my small dog moons too much. So there's that. And then I've just got 12 energies, and your opponent a lot of times is going to calculate thinking of 10. I had one of my opponents for some reason just kind of had it in their heads at the cup that I had 10 energies and calculated that, and Roxanned me and was like, all right, I got this. I drew into the energy because I was keeping my deck thin, and I beat him because they thought it was just 10. So that happens. Strategy, strengths, and weaknesses here. The strategy is go fast, as I've emphasized, and I feel like I'm even going fast in this video because we want to get through and get into the plague, but this is just a speed running deck. We're going to speed run through our match. Interestingly enough, occasionally you won't. You know, if you don't win early, then we're kind of playing some strategy and messing around a little bit. I did have a couple longer battles, but this deck wants to go fast. With your big moon early, do your best to get him loaded up and switch him in. An ideal starting though is actually to have your little moon in the active spot, so that way kind of in a pinch, you know, you can attach per turn and then throw a Sada's Vitality on if we're going second, and then we can usually get a knockout because he hits for 70, so he's going to knock out most basics, right? Where's he at? Just to kind of have a look at him. Vengeance Fletching, so we can do 70 damage on turn 1 for us, if we're going second, and that's oftentimes good enough for a knockout. But and you want this guy on the bench because a lot of times you can, if he gets on the bench, you could Dark Patch Sada's Vitality to a switch card, and that's the way to go. So that's how you can just get things moving quickly, and the Sada's Vitalities just help always keep yourself loaded up and to draw. I mean, that's such a ridiculous card for this deck that it's great. The other thing is you can one turn KO any card with Frenzied Gouging, and I know that you are getting yourself down, but if you're quick enough, you can just switch cart him out of the active. If he's got a booster capsule on, he's going to be at 290. So if you're on turn 2, your opponent oftentimes is not able to be fast enough to knock him out the next turn, and if you can switch yourself out into another one, then you can win. Especially now, this is why I took this deck to the cup with a lot of these now that we're getting evolutions out there with a lot, especially Dragapult. He plays, I feel like he can hit you for 200, sure, but he's not going to one-shot these guys. You can boom knock him out next turn, and usually they don't have a second one ready to go, so it can take a little bit of time. So that's what I love about him. Now then we have our little moon late. As we mentioned, there are plenty of ancient cards in here. It's not a crazy amount because we do have a lot of switch cards and bosses and things like that. The maximum damage you're usually going to hit is about 270. So he's oftentimes not going to knock your opponent's cards out, the big cards out in one hit, but a lot of times he can be enough to get you your game. A A lot of times you may play with 2 of them in the end, and yeah, it takes 2 turns, but your opponent's going to take 1 prize card when they knock him out, and then that's going to help you go for game. So the flexibility is really nice of having a 1 prizer and a 2 prizer that can both attack. You can use Sada's Vitality to load up on, and it's just going to really be hitting late, and it's so easy to discard here as well. Strengths and weaknesses here, as I've mentioned, supersonic fast. I mean, this is as fast as supersonic with all of the golden Sonic with the rings. We're going quick, we're loaded up, we're ready to go. These are basic Pokemon. They're easy to get onto the bench. There's so much draw power involved in this deck, so much discard power, so that we can thin the deck. That's another thing that you can't underrate here, is do your best to thin. If you don't need those nest balls, get them away. Focus though on your earthen vessels. Once you're in a good position where you don't need those Explorer's Guidance, that's 2 ancient cards to add in 1 turn to there. So really focus on things like that, getting rid of ancients that we don't need, using earthen vessels as quickly as possible to either make sure you have energy and discard to Dark Patch, or Sada's Vitality, or go from there, right? So super cool. And then late we're using that little moon that only takes 2 energy, and you can load him up in a single turn with the Sada's Vitality, right? So cool. Weaknesses is, it is really best when going second. This deck wants to get a KO turn 2, and even if you go second and you don't hit on that KO, then sometimes you are playing from behind. Sometimes it is a challenge to catch up, because you are going to be able to one-shot anything, but you're also taking 200 damage. So if you're not careful and you get this 2 for 2 every single turn, then you're going to get into some trouble later on when your opponent can, if they took the first 2 prizers, then that's how it's going to go. So it's kind of a race to the finish with this. And then also a bad starting hand can be doom. We've only got nest balls in there to draw cards. If we can't get ourselves some energies in the discard, we can't use Sada's Vitality to help us draw. We're stuck with PokéStops then that can be an issue. In two games, one of which I lost in the cup, Squawkabilly was prized. Another game I had my Greninja prize. So we're only playing one of these big draw engines, so that can be tough. And then we're milling a lot of cards. Another game I lost in the top 8. My starting hand was 2 Boss's Orders of my 3, but it was either get trapped with 2 Boss's Orders and nothing else in hand, or Squawk and Seize, discard the 2. It worked. I discarded the 2, I got a PokéStop and got a solid hand out of that, but guess what? I PokéStopped, discarded my 3rd Bosses, and that was the doom. That's what cost me the game. So sometimes the mill can kill you in that, but overall it's a lot of times you can get around it. Like I won one game where the Squawk was prized. I won a game where my Greninja was prized, and I didn't get him until prize 5, so not bad. Now this might be the smallest other cards to consider list that I ever make in my videos, because there's only 2. I just love how this deck works. I think that there's nothing really to do with this deck. Definitely gonna have to consider how it's going to look post rotation and how I'm gonna make up for all of these cards that we're gonna be missing. It's not gonna be the same, and I don't think we really can replace a lot. But anyway, for now, in its current iteration, if you really want to kind of not risk losing your Boss's Orders, you can throw in the counter catchers, because then the Squawk and Seize is the only way you're going to mill them. You don't have to worry about them getting discarded from a PokéStop. They'll go straight to hand, which could help you. Could help you if you're behind. On the other one I would consider would be Night Stretcher. So maybe Night Stretcher is one to think about to replace some of these cards. In my opinion, this is one of the few times I'm going Super Rod over Night Stretcher. I don't know what else I would remove for it, but it would be a great card to add in there if you could find some room for it. Maybe it's gonna replace Trekking Shoes or something like that. So something to think about there. And that will do it for this episode of the Hawks Pokemon Nest. Hope you enjoy this deck, this borderline rogue deck. Don't roast me in the comments. This is probably the furthest away I'll get. I just really wanted to share this deck with you all. I think it's because it's probably like the best deck I've made, and obviously there's a lot of cards that do go in the kind of best list version of this, but I really like it. I think it's super fun to play. Try it on TCG Live. Make sure you tune in for our next episode, which I will take this deck to TCG Live to try out. If you did like what you saw, though, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can become part of the Hawks Nest. We're a fabulous flock of fearless folks who love to do what we love. I love making these decks. I love playing Pokemon. I love that you all love to watch this. So thank you for the views. Thank you for the comments. Thank you for all the tips as well as we're going through this journey together. If you're not quite ready to fly yet, though, just hit that like button. We'll show up in an algorithm near you in the near future. But until then, we'll see you next time.